It started as a faint shadow on the sonar screen, a shape where no ship should be. But what archaeologists just pulled from the ocean floor off Madagascar is something the sea was never supposed to give back. For 3 centuries, the Indian Ocean held its silence. And now, that silence has been broken. In mid-2025, a research team scanning the seabed near Sainte Marie Island off the eastern coast of Madagascar detected an anomaly. The sonar image showed a pattern, not geological, not natural, something wooden. Something scattered across the ocean floor in a formation that only happens one way. Catastrophic structural failure. The team mapped the site. They documented the scatter pattern. They analyzed sediment layers. And in July 2025, they confirmed what maritime historians had been searching for: the wreck of a Portuguese ship, captured by pirates in 1721 and lost to the ocean in these waters. The cargo they found tells a story 3 centuries old: gold, diamonds, emeralds. Not the vessel's original cargo, but plunder, treasure seized in one of the most daring raids of the pirate era. These weren't legitimate trade goods moving through approved colonial routes. This was stolen wealth, taken by force and lost before it could be spent. The wreck lies off Sainte Marie Island, in waters that once served as a sanctuary for some of the most wanted men in maritime history. Pirates who operated outside the reach of European naval law and made fortunes raiding ships bound for Lisbon, London, and Amsterdam. This discovery represents a rare confirmed recovery of pirate-associated cargo from the Golden Age of Piracy. And it's not just about the treasure. It's about what it represents, a moment frozen in time when ambition, violence, and the sea collided. The team that made the discovery includes archaeologists and salvage experts working to document and preserve what remains. The focus is understanding the historical context of this wreck and what it can tell us about piracy in the Indian Ocean during one of maritime history's most chaotic periods. Because this wreck isn't just valuable. It's a window into a world that vanished beneath the waves. But the ship itself is only the beginning of the mystery. Because what it was carrying raises a question archaeologists are only now beginning to answer. How did this treasure end up here? And who died trying to move it? The vessel has been identified as the Portuguese ship Nossa Senhora do Cabo. In 1721, it was sailing the Indian Ocean, carrying cargo destined for European markets. But it never reached its destination. The ship was intercepted by pirates, captured, its crew overpowered, and its valuable cargo, gold, precious stones, trade goods, was seized in an act of maritime theft that would have sent shockwaves through the colonial powers operating in these waters. The pirate responsible was Olivier Levasseur, known as La Bouse, the Buzzard. Levasseur operated in the Indian Ocean during the final years of the Golden Age of Piracy, a period when European empires were tightening their grip on trade routes, and naval patrols were hunting down the last of the independent pirate crews. By 1721, the era of famous pirates like Henry Every and Thomas Tew had already passed. Every had vanished decades earlier, after his legendary raid on the Mughal treasure ship in 1695. Tew had been killed in battle in 1695. But men like Levasseur continued the tradition, operating from bases along the Madagascar coast, where the complex geography of bays and islands made pursuit nearly impossible. Sainte Marie Island was one of these bases, a haven for ships that flew no flag and answered to no crown. A place where stolen cargo could be divided, where crews could rest between raids, and where the normal rules of maritime commerce simply didn't apply. After capturing the Nossa Senhora do Cabo, Levasseur brought his prize toward these waters. But the ship never made it to safe harbor. Whether it struck a reef, broke apart in a storm, or suffered some other catastrophic failure, the result was the same. The vessel went down, taking its stolen treasure with it. For 300 years, it stayed there. The hull deteriorated, currents scattered the debris, and the treasure, gold and gemstones taken by force, lay in darkness, waiting. What the debris field revealed. Yet, what they found inside the debris field was even more significant than just precious metals and stones. because these weren't just valuables. They were evidence of a historical moment. Archaeologists found a scatter pattern consistent with violent structural failure. The cargo wasn't neatly stored in a preserved hold. It was dispersed across the seabed, mixed with fragments of rotted wood and corroded metal fittings. This wasn't a shipwreck preserved in time like an untouched museum. It was the aftermath of disaster, pulled apart by 3 centuries of current and tide. The treasure includes gold and gemstones, diamonds and emeralds among them. These weren't mined in Madagascar. The island had no sources for such stones. They came from somewhere else, likely part of the Portuguese colonial trade network that moved precious materials from Asian and African sources to European markets. The Nossa Senhora do Cabo was part of that network, a link in a chain that connected mines and trade depots across continents to the aristocratic and merchant classes of Europe. And when Levasseur seized the ship, he interrupted that chain. Piracy wasn't romantic. It wasn't about adventure or freedom. It was theft, calculated, violent, and profitable for those who succeeded. Pirates didn't bury their treasure on remote beaches. They fenced it through black market networks in ports where corrupt officials asked no questions and took their cut. The treasure aboard this wreck was currency, portable wealth that could be converted to cash, supplies, or safe passage. Gold could be melted down and sold. Gemstones could be traded individually. Everything had value. Everything could be moved, but it never was. The ship went down before the treasure could reach any market, and everyone aboard went with it. The ocean doesn't care about motive. It doesn't distinguish between the original Portuguese crew and the pirates who captured them. It doesn't separate the willing from the forced. It only claims what sinks. And now these silent witnesses are starting to speak, not with words, but with objects. The gold and gemstones are data points, clues to trade routes, market values, and the mechanics of colonial-era commerce and piracy. Each fragment of wood is a timestamp, preserving information about shipbuilding techniques and materials. Each piece of corroded metal is evidence of how this ship was constructed and what it endured. The recovery team has documented the site. Conservators are treating the artifacts in controlled environments, using techniques designed to prevent deterioration. Gold doesn't corrode, so those pieces have survived relatively intact. But wood and other organic materials are fragile. The clock is ticking on what can still be preserved, and all of it tells a story that was never supposed to be told. A story of colonial trade interrupted by violence, of stolen wealth lost before it could enrich anyone, of a ship that sailed into history and vanished beneath the waves. But bringing these artifacts to the surface is only half the challenge. The wreck lies in coastal waters off Sainte Marie Island, accessible but complicated. Visibility is limited, currents shift unpredictably, and the site itself is unstable, with sections buried under sand and sediment that moves with every storm. Sonar mapping identified the debris field. Divers surveyed the site, documenting artifact locations and creating a 3-dimensional record of what remains. The recovery focused on items at risk of being scattered or lost, portable objects that could be safely retrieved and preserved. But much of the wreck remains in place. The main structure of the hull, fragmented and deteriorated, is still embedded in the seabed. Wood that has spent 3 centuries underwater is fragile. Exposure to air causes rapid decay. Proper conservation requires slow, careful treatment, soaking in chemical solutions that stabilize the material and prevent collapse. Additional research is planned to analyze wood samples, map the full debris field, and determine what structural features might still be identifiable. Every phase is documented with the understanding that this site is finite. What remains today may be gone tomorrow. Storms erode, currents scatter. Marine organisms continue to break down organic material. and time, indifferent and relentless, claims a little more with each passing year. What makes this discovery historically significant isn't just the treasure, it's the context. The Nossa Senhora do Cabo represents a specific moment in maritime history, the final years of Indian Ocean piracy, when European empires were consolidating power and the era of independent pirate crews was coming to an end. Olivier Levasseur was part of that ending. He continued raiding into the 1720s, but his time was running out. By 1730, he had been captured and executed. The age of piracy didn't end with a single event. It faded gradually as naval patrols became more effective, as trade routes became better protected, as the places pirates could operate shrank year by year. Levasseur's career spanned the transition from the wild, lawless years of the late 17th century to the increasingly regulated maritime world of the 18th. He had sailed with Benjamin Hornigold and Sam Bellamy in the Caribbean before moving to the Indian Ocean, where opportunities remained for those willing to risk everything. The Indian Ocean was different from the Caribbean. Trade routes were longer. Naval presence was thinner, and the prizes were often richer. Ships carrying silks, spices, precious metals, and gemstones from India, Southeast Asia, and East Africa to European markets. Levasseur understood this. He positioned himself along these routes, striking when opportunity presented itself. The capture of the Nossa Senhora do Cabo was likely one of several such raids, though historical records of pirate activities in this region are fragmentary at best. What we know comes from scattered sources: naval reports, colonial correspondence, trial records, and the occasional survivor account. Pirates didn't keep detailed logs of their illegal activities, and when they were captured, they rarely survived to provide testimony. Levasseur's eventual capture came years after the Nossa Senhora do Cabo sank. He was taken on Réunion Island, tried, and sentenced to death. According to legend, and with pirate history, legend and fact often blur, he threw a cryptogram into the crowd at his execution, supposedly revealing the location of hidden treasure. Whether that story is true or embellishment, we'll likely never know. But what we do know is that the treasure from the Nossa Senhora do Cabo was never recovered during his lifetime. It went down with the ship and stayed hidden until 2025. This wreck is a marker of that transition. A ship taken in an act of piracy that would have been routine a generation earlier, but was becoming increasingly rare. A treasure that represented enormous wealth, but never reached any destination. A crew, Portuguese sailors, pirate raiders, and anyone else aboard, that vanished into the ocean with no record of their final moments. The early 18th century was a complicated time in the Indian Ocean. European powers, primarily the Portuguese, Dutch, English, and French, were establishing colonial footholds and competing for control of trade routes. These routes connected resource-rich regions in Asia and Africa to European markets hungry for luxury goods. The Portuguese had been operating in the Indian Ocean since the late 15th century, establishing trading posts and fortified settlements along the coasts of Africa, India, and Southeast Asia. By 1721, their empire was declining, but their ships still carried valuable cargo. Pirates like Levasseur exploited the gaps in this system. Naval patrols couldn't be everywhere at once. Communication between colonial outposts was slow, and the vast distances of the Indian Ocean meant that a pirate ship could strike, disappear, and be hundreds of miles away before pursuit could be organized. Sainte Marie Island became a notorious pirate haven precisely because of its location and geography. Situated off Madagascar's east coast, it offered protected anchorages, fresh water, and proximity to major shipping lanes. Pirates could refit their ships, trade with local populations, and wait for the next opportunity. The island's role in pirate history is well documented. Estimates suggest that at the height of pirate activity in the late 1690s and early 1700s, over 1,000 pirates used Sainte Marie as a base. Some settled there permanently, marrying into local communities and effectively retiring from piracy. But by 1721, that era was ending. European powers were coordinating their anti-piracy efforts. Naval squadrons were dispatched specifically to hunt pirates, and colonial governors were under pressure to eliminate the threat to commerce. The capture and sinking of the Nossa Senhora do Cabo occurred during this twilight period. Piracy was still possible, but increasingly dangerous. The margins for error were shrinking. And there's still one question that remains difficult to answer with certainty. What happened in those final moments before the ship went down? The debris field shows signs of violent dispersal, but the specific cause of the sinking is unclear. Did the ship strike a reef in these shallow, treacherous waters? Did a storm overwhelm it? Was there some other structural failure, damage from the original capture, poor maintenance, overloading? The historical record offers no answers. No log survived. No witness account was recorded. The ship simply disappeared, and for 300 years, no one knew exactly where. Researchers are analyzing the physical evidence. The pattern of debris can indicate whether the ship broke apart suddenly or sank more gradually. Wood samples might show damage consistent with grounding, storm stress, or other causes. The position of artifacts relative to structural remains can reveal how the cargo shifted as the ship went down. Marine archaeologists use these clues to reconstruct the ship's final moments. If the vessel struck a reef, there should be evidence of impact damage on the remaining hull timbers. If it foundered in a storm, the debris pattern would show the gradual breaking apart of the structure as it settled. If it was already damaged from the initial pirate attack, there might be evidence of hasty repairs or structural weaknesses. The waters around Sainte Marie Island are known for being treacherous. Coral reefs extend from the shore in complex, unpredictable patterns. Currents can shift dramatically with tides and seasons, and storms, while not constant, can appear suddenly and with devastating force. For a ship that may have been hastily sailed by a pirate crew unfamiliar with these specific waters, the risks would have been substantial. Navigation in the early 18th century relied on dead reckoning, coastal landmarks, and basic charts that were often inaccurate. A miscalculation of even a few degrees could mean the difference between safe passage and disaster. If the Nossa Senhora do Cabo was overloaded with treasure and supplies from the raid, its handling characteristics would have changed. The ship would have sat lower in the water, responded more slowly to helm commands, and been more vulnerable to waves and shallow obstacles. But some questions may never be answered. The identities of those aboard, their final actions, whether they had time to understand what was happening, or if the end came too quickly. What we know is this. The Nossa Senhora do Cabo was captured by Olivier Levasseur in 1721. It was carrying valuable cargo. It was brought towards Sainte Marie Island, and somewhere in these waters it sank. The treasure has been found. The wreck has been located. Conservation is underway, and researchers are working to piece together what this site can tell us about maritime trade, piracy, and the complex world of the early 18th century Indian Ocean. But the deeper story, the human story, the one that might tell us who these people were and what they experienced, remains fragmentary. The ocean gives up some secrets reluctantly. Others it keeps. The conservation process for artifacts recovered from this wreck is extensive and expensive. Gold pieces can be cleaned and stabilized relatively easily. They're chemically stable and resistant to corrosion, but other materials require specialized treatment. Wood recovered from shipwrecks is waterlogged and fragile. After centuries underwater, the cellular structure has been compromised. Exposure to air causes rapid deterioration, as the wood dries and contracts. To prevent this, conservators use a process called polyethylene glycol treatment, where the wood is gradually soaked in solutions of increasing concentration. This replaces the water in the wood cells with a waxy substance that provides structural support. The process can take years. Large timbers from major shipwrecks have required decades of treatment before they could be safely displayed. For the Nossa Senhora do Cabo, which has been underwater for 3 centuries, the challenge is particularly acute. Gemstones are more stable, but still require careful handling. Diamonds and emeralds can survive underwater indefinitely, but they may be encrusted with marine growth or embedded in concretions, hard deposits of minerals and corrosion products that form around metal objects underwater. Removing these concretions without damaging the underlying artifacts requires patience and skill. Conservators use tools ranging from dental picks to electrolysis systems, carefully working to reveal what's beneath without causing damage. This discovery is significant not because it solves every mystery, but because it opens a window into a moment we thought was lost forever. Every artifact recovered is a piece of evidence. Every detail documented is a data point. Every fragment of wood or corroded metal is a connection to real people who lived, sailed, and died in these waters 3 centuries ago. The work continues. More analysis, more research, more careful excavation and documentation. Because what we do now determines what future generations will be able to learn from this site. Beyond the immediate excitement of discovered treasure, this find has implications for our understanding of early 18th century maritime history. It provides physical evidence for trade patterns that were previously documented only in written records. It offers insights into ship construction techniques of the period, and it confirms the historical presence of pirate activity in these waters during a specific time frame. Museums and academic institutions are already expressing interest in the artifacts. Proper curation could result in exhibits that bring this history to life for public audiences. Educational programs could use this discovery to teach about the complex intersections of trade, colonialism, and piracy. There are also legal and ethical considerations. Madagascar has laws governing underwater cultural heritage and the recovery of artifacts from its territorial waters. International conventions address the treatment of historic shipwrecks and questions of ownership, particularly with stolen goods recovered from pirate vessels, create unique challenges. Who owns treasure that was itself stolen 3 centuries ago? The descendants of the original Portuguese owners, the government of Madagascar, in whose waters it was found, the research team that located and recovered it? These questions have no simple answers and will likely require negotiation and legal review. But regardless of ownership, the imperative to preserve and study these artifacts remains. This is human history. It deserves to be documented, understood, and shared. The ocean held this secret for 300 years. Now, for a brief moment in historical time, we have the chance to learn from it, if we act carefully, respectfully, and quickly enough. The treasure has surfaced, but the full story of the Nossa Senhora do Cabo is still being written. And with every storm, every passing season, the race to preserve what remains becomes more urgent. What happened to the Portuguese crew when the ship was captured? How many pirates were aboard when it sank? Were there survivors who made it to shore, leaving no record of their escape? These questions echo across 3 centuries, unanswered. The artifacts don't speak in words, but they speak. In the weight of gold coins, each one stamped with the mark of a European mint. In the cut of gemstones, shaped by artisans whose names we'll never know. In the grain of wood timbers, grown in forests that may no longer exist. This is what archaeology offers. Not complete answers, but fragments. Not certainty, but evidence. Not the full story, but enough pieces to begin reconstruction. and as researchers continue their work in the waters off Sainte Marie Island, as conservators treat fragile artifacts in laboratories, as historians cross-reference this discovery against archival records, the story expands. Every treasure ship is also a time capsule. Every wreck is a moment frozen. And every recovery is an opportunity to connect with people who lived in a world vastly different from our own, yet driven by the same fundamental human motivations: survival, wealth, power, and the hope for something better. The Nossa Senhora. Do Cabo sailed into history on a voyage that ended in catastrophe. But its story didn't end there. It continued in the silence of the ocean floor, waiting. And now, brought back to light, it continues still. Respect the past, search the deep, and keep watching the water. Because the ocean holds more secrets than we've yet discovered. And every wave that breaks on Madagascar's shores carries the echo of voyages long forgotten, until the day they're remembered again.